Sony's billion-dollar disaster. Now, there's a headline for you, though likely the total far exceeds that by now, which makes this all the more concerning. But while everybody's been focused on, enamored by the beautiful tragedy that was Concord, and what a beautiful disaster that was, completely poetic, but nobody's talking about the bigger picture here. They're not talking about how only just a few years ago, Sony invested heavily into live service games, and outside of Helldivers 2, they've all either failed, had their projects canceled, their studios shut down, or don't necessarily have the brightest future. And that's what I want to talk about. Look, the AAA game space has been obsessed with live service games. We all can see it. It's transparent as all hell. It's not about the value that they can deliver to their customers. It's about the value that they can deliver to their shareholders. And in that, it's a little weird. It feels like a betrayal on the side of Sony because their games have always stood for high quality premium titles, but not live service cash grabs. So it begs the question that I'm sure a lot of people are asking, when did Sony want to stop making games for us? Over the past two console generations, Sony has dominated with the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. The PlayStation 4, released in 2013, quickly establishing itself as a leader in the market, selling over 117 million units worldwide, far outpacing the Xbox One, which struggled to even get half of that number. The success wasn't just about the hardware. Sony's lineup of single-player titles, including God of War, Last of Us Part 2, Horizon Zero Dawn, Spider-Man, Ghost of Tsushima, these were all critically acclaimed and commercial hits, creating a reputation for delivering blockbuster experiences beloved by players. A key moment in Sony's rise over Microsoft came with the launch of the Xbox One, when the Xbox attempted to introduce restrictive DRM policies that would prevent players from simply trading or sharing their games. Sony capitalized on this misstep with a now iconic ad.
This is how you share your games on PS4.
Thanks.
PlayStation.
This simple tongue-in-cheek ad humiliated Xbox and highlighted Sony's player-friendly approach, giving them a massive PR boost before the launch of both consoles. As a result, along with Xbox's own PR mistakes, the Xbox entered into the console generation on the back foot, and despite making efforts to try to recover, the damage was done, giving PlayStation 4 the strong headwind it needed to cruise through its life cycle and into the next. Now, in this generation, the PlayStation 5 has continued Sony's winning streak. Although the Xbox has made strides with services like Game Pass, their first-party titles have been inconsistent, with failed major releases like Redfall and flagship entries like Starfield and Halo Infinite receiving mixed reception from their fans. In contrast, Sony has continued to release highly successful single-player games like Spider-Man Miles Morales, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, Spider-Man 2, Horizon Forbidden West, and God of War Ragnarok. While Xbox has leaned heavily into Game Pass as a strategy, Sony struck on its strengths, delivering high-quality, narrative-driven games that sell millions of copies and generate long-term goodwill amongst their fans. I think that Sony's decision to focus on these blockbuster premium titles has allowed them to maintain their dominance. Even as the industry has started to shift towards subscription services and live service models, Xbox's reliance on Game Pass, while innovative, has yet to deliver the kind of killer releases and exclusives that would sway the masses away from PlayStation's strong releases. This has allowed Sony to maintain their foothold as the console of choice for players that are seeking high-caliber single-player experiences. However, just a couple years ago, Sony had announced plans to expand into live service games, signaling a major shift in strategy. The company initially revealed plans to release 12 live service games by 2026, aiming to tap into the lucrative, reoccurring revenue streams that come from ongoing games like Fortnite or Destiny. This push was seen as a move to diversify and future-proof their business model, catering to their shareholders eager to see a steady cash flow rather than the it-driven model that they have relied on up until now. From an investor or an executive standpoint, this makes total sense. I mean, Genshin Impact has made $5 billion. Fortnite's made over $26 billion. Live service games make a lot of money. But when you're blinded by greed, you tend to miss the obvious things. And in this case, it's the inherent difference between what's made them successful and their shotgun strategy of dumping out 12 live service games by 2026. I think it's relevant here to point out that Sony's brand identity within the market is that of the premium console experience. That is what their customers have come to expect. Xbox is the affordable one, Nintendo is the unique one, PlayStation, that's premium. And Sony knows that. That's what they've been pushing. Well, yeah, they take a gamble on their single-player games. You're going to have a Baldur's Gate 3 or an Elden Ring or a Black Myth Wukong that's going to come out and it's going to steal some of the limelight. Players can always justify buying a PlayStation game because they know it's going to be a highly refined, great experience that's worth their money. That's why people buy PlayStations. So there's something inherently not PlayStation about live service games because they don't represent any of that. And I think that's where their troubles begin. Let's first start off with the live service games that PlayStation has canceled. The Last of Us Online, initially announced as a standalone multiplayer title tied to The Last of Us Part 2, this project was highly anticipated by its fans who had already enjoyed the multiplayer mode in the original game. However, in mid-2023, Naughty Dog revealed that the project was put on hold due to concerns about their ability to deliver a high-quality live service experience. Bungie, which was brought in to help evaluate Sony's live service games, reportedly found that the project's retention and long-term viability were lacking. As a result, Naughty Dog ended up scaling back the game and eventually canceled it altogether to focus on their single-player games. Spider-Man: The Great Web was an unannounced multiplayer Spider-Man game in early development at Insomniac. However, it was quietly canceled before its announcement. Rumors suggest that the game was intended to be a live service experience, but it never gained any traction, and early leaks and information indicated that the project just didn't fit the established single-player focused Insomniac Spider-Man universe, and concerns over how well a live service Spider-Man game would do kept it from going anywhere. After years of fan demand, a Twisted Metal reboot was finally in the works, with Firesprite Studios leading the charge. The project was initially intended to relaunch the beloved franchise as a live service game, but this too was canceled. Reports indicated development issues alongside changes in studio's leadership, which ended up causing some delays. Additionally, the direction of the game was increasingly at odds with PlayStation's vision for live service titles, and as a result, Twisted Metal was scrapped before making it too far into development. London studio, known for their work on titles like Blood and Truth, had been developing a multiplayer live service game. However, in a major restructuring move in 2023, Sony decided to close down the studio and cancel the project alongside it. The shutdown came as a part of Sony's broader reevaluation of its live service plans, which saw multiple projects axed and studios closed down, just like Deviation Games. At this point, 6 out of the 12 planned live service games have been canceled, with multiple studios seeing massive layoffs and closures. While specific numbers weren't shared, this likely cost the company hundreds of millions of dollars while they funded projects and studios that would eventually just be shut down. Layoffs, severance packages for employees, the salaries for their time while they were developing these games, legal fees all flushed down the drain, as none of these games would ever see the light of day. The fault lies squarely with Sony's leadership. Instead of continuing to leverage studios like Naughty Dog or Insomniac for doing what they do best, creating timeless narrative-driven experiences, Sony gambled these resources on live service projects from studios that know nothing of live service games and likely didn't even want to make a live service game, meaning that they were all doomed from the start. Result? Cancellations, layoffs, and years of wasted development. Looking at Naughty Dog and Insomniac specifically, imagine the incredible single-player titles that we could have gotten if they were working on those during that time. New IPs developed by established studios that players have been wanting to see new games from. Games that would contribute to the legacy of PlayStation. Instead, Sony's shift to live service games violated what made those studios great, wasting their time and that of the players. A lot of wasted time, money, and potential from my perspective. Well, yeah, Spider-Man 2 was still being worked on by Insomniac at the time. When I saw the news that they had Insomniac and Naughty Dog working on live service games, I just sat there scratching my head. Those are resources that were better used for those studios to be working on new IPs. I think I speak on behalf of all gamers when I say I'd like to see something other than a remake or remaster from Naughty Dog when it comes to The Last of Us. So, you want to see if your studios are flexible. I get it. Look at Guerrilla Games. They came out with Killzone, now they make Horizon. It's good to test that kind of thing, but you don't always want to do it, and nor are those studios actually capable of doing so in the first place. And that just brings me back around to how inherently not PlayStation all of this is. Because 12 games isn't experimenting, that's an overdose. From a platform and a publisher that isn't known for live service games. That's not what your customers are expecting. That's not what they come to you for. And from my perspective, live service games are as far from what a PlayStation game would be. I think there's a fundamental issue with the way that PlayStation has been approaching this entire thing, and I think it's because of the fact that they are so used to bartering for people's money and not people's time. These are two completely different things with completely different values, and in that, players aren't going to buy. Sony's push into live service games has not been smooth. Each release shows that they're just throwing things at the wall and hoping something sticks. Square Enix's Foam Stars is a prime example of this. Positioned as a colorful team-based shooter, Foam Stars is essentially Nintendo's Splatoon. which has been around since 2015. It's had 2 sequels, and it's waning in relevance. Does that sound familiar to anybody? It's no wonder that on release, Foamstars struggled to gain any traction at all because it didn't do anything fresh or innovative, and a better game already existed. In a crowded marketplace where Sony's audience is conditioned to expect high-quality premium titles, premium experiences, most of them that are directed at adult audiences, Foamstars just doesn't make any sense. Now, on the other hand, Helldivers 2, which launched just days after Foamstars, became a global phenomenon. In the months following its February release, the game sold 12 million copies in 12 weeks, making it PlayStation's fastest-selling game of all time. It delivered exactly what you would expect from a successful live service title, or any game for that matter. As a third-person shooter, Helldivers introduced innovative gameplay loops that we hadn't seen before, its live service monetization was ethical, and battle passes didn't expire. The game's theme sparked a wave of memes, social media role-playing, and creative fan content like propaganda posters. Helldivers 2 was an unexpected breakout hit, comparable to successes that we've seen like Baldur's Gate 3, Palworld, or Black Myth Wukong. However, Sony couldn't help but get in their own way. They planned to implement a mandatory PlayStation login to be able to play the game, despite players already having enjoyed the game for months without such requirement. The player base remained relatively strong, but this sudden change threw all of the goodwill out the window, especially adding the complication that the game would be removed from service in 180 countries where PlayStation accounts weren't supported. This move undermined the game's success and alienated a large portion of its player base. Combining this with the game's balance issues, lack of variety in content, and waning player interest, Helldivers 2 lost 90% of its player base over the course of 5 months. For a live service game to thrive, it needs to foster a strong and active community, and removing Helldivers 2 from so many regions was a decision that actively works against that. The lack of availability in all these different markets not only limited the sales, but it also hurt player engagement. Sony effectively silenced a wide swath of players and made it where there were far less people that were talking about the game, playing the game, and ultimately destroyed all of its momentum. In an industry where success for live service games hinges on player retention and growing that community, Sony showed that these live service games aren't for the players, they're for them. And what better encapsulates a game not made for the players than the now rotting corpse of Concord? A game 8 years too late, with Wish.com's Guardians of the Galaxy, the most unattractive and uninteresting characters, whose only key selling points is that it was made by ex-Bungie developers and it would post weekly short films to fill out its universe. Concord was so highly praised by PlayStation before its release that either they have no idea what a good game looks like, or they thought consumers were mindless enough to just suck up any slop that they dropped on the floor. The Xbox 360 Burger King games were more original than Concord. Industry insiders revealed that the game cost upwards of $400 million, likely far more than that as this doesn't account for the studio's purchase. The game claimed internally to be Sony's Star Wars and the future of PlayStation. A game nobody asked for, nobody wanted, that sold roughly 25,000 copies and was shut down only 2 weeks after its launch. When you lay out the timeline of all this stuff, none of it makes sense. They have to be sitting in an office with a blindfold on, throwing darts at a dartboard, and that's how they're making their decisions. Because one, they had Foamstars come out 2 days before Helldivers 2. Why would you line up 2 live service games back to back like that? Doesn't make any sense to me. And on top of that, you just made Splatoon, so that was basically useless. It's basically the same thing that you did with Concord, making an Overwatch game. But then you come out with Helldivers 2, absolutely phenomenal game, does absolutely fantastic, and then you jump in front of it and stop all of its momentum because you want to force players to log in with PlayStation accounts, blocking the game in 180 countries, only to walk it back, but then not put it back in the 180 countries. What sense does that make? What are you doing? Then we take it over to Concord. Good God, what a terrible idea. Who thought that was a good idea? You could have grabbed 20 random people off of the street, half of them being blind, and they all would have told you that Concord wasn't worthwhile. They probably didn't even play video games. It doesn't even matter to them. You would have been hard-pressed to find anybody. You were hard-pressed to find anybody that liked the game outside of games journalists and the friends and family of the people that made Concord. How did you look at that game and think that it was worthwhile, especially with how much money you put into it? None of it makes any sense. They have to not know what they're doing at all. That's the only explanation that makes sense in this case. With everything that they've done so far, with the studios that they've closed, with how they've handled Helldivers 2, with Foamstars and Concord, there is no faith that I have to give when it comes to the live service games that they have yet to release. In the coming months and years, we get to look forward to Bungie's marathon, likely the only one that we can be optimistic about. However, nothing in the past few months tells me that Bungie's leadership is capable of managing or delivering a successful live service game going forward. They've laid off a majority of their staff, they've scaled back Destiny to basically being on maintenance mode, and they will likely see more restructuring in the coming months. While Marathon is an interesting concept and Bungie has delivered enduring franchises, I don't think that same spark of innovation and creativity is there like it used to be in the early days. Then there's the Horizon MMO that's being developed by NCSoft, which is an interesting concept for an MMO, but NCSoft doesn't necessarily have the best track record for releasing successful MMOs. See their last release in Throne and Liberty. There's also Project Gummy Bears, another game that's being developed by a studio that's comprised of former Bungie developers, just like Firewalk with Concord. We saw how that ended. Finally, we have the next live service game, which everybody's looking forward to watching fail, which is Fair Games, developed by Haven Studios, which was recently acquired by Sony and worked closely with Firewalk Studios on technical support for Concord. Looks like they're going to have a lot of time on their hands. Announced about a year ago with a reveal trailer, Fair Games is a competitive heist game where players are going to compete to steal from the ultra-rich in a dystopian setting. The game features a blend of PvP and PvE mechanics with teams battling not only each other but AI-controlled guards. The lack of awareness by Sony making an eat-the-rich live service game is levels of irony that I never thought we'd reach. A game built from the ground up to extract as much money as possible from players for the least amount of effort possible. Games that are meant to profit far more than they are worth by taking advantage of lower and middle-class consumers using marketing psychology every single time they log in. Hey, Sony, what exactly is the message behind the featured black protagonist in the trailer backed by a hip-hop soundtrack that's stealing from people because they think they deserve it more? Without a doubt, this is going to be another Concord. Former Ubisoft developers working hand-in-hand with Firewalk, the makers of Concord. Yeah, I can see it written all over this game. Again, we have a game that's years behind the heist trend of Payday, with tokenized representation made for an audience that doesn't exist. This game's trailer on YouTube has 36k dislikes, and all of the comments are flaming the game from every direction. I would imagine, yet again, PlayStation is likely not going to take the hint like they should have with Concord's beta player numbers not reaching over 1,000 players, and release this game regardless of consumer reception. Outside of Helldivers 2, I have no idea who these games are being made for, and neither does PlayStation. They are targeting audiences that don't exist and audiences that don't buy their games. The truth is, Sony's live service experiment has been plagued with failures because it veers too far from what makes PlayStation games so impactful. Experiences that are prioritizing quality over quantity and have target audiences. Every canceled project, every misstep and mistake represents wasted potential and talent that could have brought better games made for the right reasons. Games like God of War, Uncharted, The Last of Us, Ghost of Tsushima, these all left lasting impacts because they weren't chasing trends, they were leading them. Now, Sony seems more concerned with chasing fleeting profits rather than sticking to the values that built their empire. Their shift into live service has been nothing short of a disaster. In the end, it's what they deserve for shifting their sight away from their players and to their shareholders. Listen to me. Make great games and the money will come. Make soulless, pandering, patronizing cash grabs and the money will leave. With $400 million spent on Concord's development, the cost of buying the studio, the cost of all of the games that they've canceled mid-development, the studios they've closed, and all of these other live service failures, PlayStation has likely torched more than $1 billion by now. And with more releases right around the corner, that number's only going to continue to grow. I want to make something clear. Live service games are not the issue. It's the motivations behind wanting to make a live service game that are the problem. If you look at a game like Helldivers 2, it was motivated by the right reasons. You see it in the game design, you see it in the themes of the game, you see it in its monetization. Everything was earnable in the game, battle passes didn't expire, it wasn't made to be an infinite money glitch, it was just made to be a good game, and that's where you always have to start. But when I look at games like Fair Games, Concord, or a slew of the other releases, these are all uninspired, generic, copycat games that are meant for nothing more than to take money from the players. And when I see you wanting to put out games like that and thinking that players are going to like those things, it shows just how little you think of us. When I look at a lot of the other games that are out there that they're planning on putting out, I just see them stapling on their successful IPs, stapling that name onto these games and hoping it's going to attract that audience and gain some type of traction. But at the end of the day, all you're going to be doing is just lowering the value of those IPs over time. You're tarnishing the value of that IP and what that game means to the players. Go make a God of War live service game or a gacha game and see how the players respond. Immediately, you're taking one of your most popular games, the games that made your empire, the games that made you successful, and you're turning them into a joke. You don't want to do that. I'm happy that this experiment brought us Helldivers 2. The game is much better than it has been in a long time. They've worked on it a lot lately. They've fixed a vast majority of issues with the game. It still needs a lot of content before it's ever going to reach any levels of continued success from my perspective, but we'll see what it looks like. And I'm going to tell you right now, with all the money that they've spent, all the money that they've lost on all these games, I'm hoping that it's going to stop them from making them. That's what I want. I want them to look and go, you know what? Maybe we should wait for some of our developers to reach out to us with pitches and say, hey, we have an idea for a live service game that we want to make. And chances are those are probably going to be the better ones. But if you're going out there and saying, we're investing in live service games, company A, B, C, D, you guys are all making live service games, it's probably not going to go well. You're forcing them to do something that they're not wanting to do, or they don't even have the experience in doing so in the first place. I'm so happy that the Insomniac and Naughty Dog games got canceled because, man, could you imagine what it would do to their reputation if those games came out and they sucked? Holy. You know, the funny thing is if you look at PlayStation right now, the games that have been the most successful for them have been their single-player titles. Look at how people are raving over Astro Bot right now. Look at how excited people are for the next Ghost of Tsushima game. These games make you a lot of money. They give you the reputation that you deserve when you make games like that. But you're really killing your reputation. You're really devaluing your position in the market by coming out with some of these generic cash grabs, because we can see them for what they are. We see them all day. You're not the only one putting them out. Man. It's sad to see the road that some of these publishers and studios want to go down. Sony, Ubisoft. You know I'm making a video on Xbox next. Anyway, I'm actually going to be playing some Ghost of Tsushima tonight. I finally got it downloaded on my PC. I'm just going to, dim the lights down and enjoy myself a little bit. Anyway, if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you guys like the video, share it to your friends, subscribe to the channel if you guys want to see more videos like this. Follow me on Twitch if you guys want to catch me live talking about video game news and playing video games and whatnot. Outside of that, my friends, stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Peace.
Family, 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 family.